Jacksonville. The child was born who couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts for poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. With Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history in this land of flowers.
The week that was on the 25th of November 2017 from WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. Our former broadcast partner, Jerry Pippin, would have been 77 today, Jerry died on March the 2nd of 2015. He was 75 years old. Thus, this is the 77th anniversary of his birth in a year that we saw JFK's 100th anniversary of his birth. Jerry Pippin would have been 75 today. We remember Jerry Pippin. Jerry Pippin was one of the founders of Internet radio, and he had millions of listeners. I'm just looking at his obituary here, and it's one of those things that we lose voice over and continue to lose voice over. Jerry, no doubt, was a visionary. There's no doubt about it at all. He foresaw what Internet radio would turn into. He started on his adventure in 1998 or so. Thus, he was almost 20 years ago. He was before his time, no doubt about it. We did not have the term podcasting at that time. At least it was not to the public. One of the things we have seen, however, is that the term podcasting is taking a back seat to Internet radio. If one looks at the landscape in a number of years, just looking at what is happening now in some of our outlets, the iHeart Radio of the world, radios of the world, and various other conglomerates out there. We can think of Blog Talk Radio and Spreaker's radio channel, and what is happening now as you see more consolidation in radio, and the so-called podcast community is turning into the radio community, the National Association of Broadcasters, which Jerry was a member of. We see all of those things happening now, and it has turned into a different situation, and he was at the forefront of this movement. Again, Jerry Pippin would have been 77 today. We'll do the sports now. Had to give ourselves a chance to catch our breath. This is the NBA scores from a Friday night. The Trailblazers won 27 to the Nets of Brooklyn. 125. The Knickerbockers were at the Hawks in Atlanta. Hawks won 16-104. The Magic were in Boston, 118 for the Celts and 103 for the Magic. They didn't have very much magic there. The Hornets were in Cleveland, a 1-point game there. The Cavaliers 100-199 for the Charlotte Hornets. The Raptors of Toronto were in Indiana, Pacers 107-104. The Heat was at the T-Wolves in Minnesota. Heat 109-97 for the T-Wolves. I guess they're coming down, as they say, to the ground these days. They had been winning. The Pistons of the Motor City and the Thunder of OKC. Pistons 99-98. Very close game there. The Grizzlies were in Denver. Nuggets 104-92. The Pelicans of the Big Easy in Arizona 115-91 for the Sun. The Bulls were in the Bay Area. The Warriors 143-94. I was just reading an article here about Mr. Rose and where he would be in the scheme of things, whether he will come back to play basketball again or not. If he was an MVP, he had several injuries, including an ACL injury. About his career, I believe he's around 28 or 29 now. And will he just call it quits, or will he return? Let's do the NCAA College of Football from... we'll start with Thursday for those that missed out. Ole Miss was at Mississippi State. Ole Miss 31-28. And on Friday, the University of Miami at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh pulled that out 24-14. The Baylor team was at IOU. They were 45-22. South Florida and UGF. UGF 49-42 for South Florida. High scoring game there. You could... I wonder what the over-under was. I don't see it here. But anyway, nonetheless, Virginia Tech and Virginia was shut out 10-zip there. So that is the college football scores and a look today. A number of games coming. Georgia and Georgia Tech. Ohio State. These are all... evening games or afternoon game. Well, evening games. 12 p.m. Ohio State and Michigan, Auburn, Kansas, and Oklahoma State at 12 noon. Anyway, nonetheless, East Carolina, Memphis, Alabama, Auburn. People will be tuned in there. I was looking in Alabama.com. Big game down there. Alabama is number 1. Auburn is number 6. A lot of rivalry going on there. At 3:30, Wisconsin and Minnesota. Minnesota was shut out last week, I believe. Penn State and Maryland. Today, Boise State and Fresno State. As we move on through here, West Virginia and number 4, Oklahoma. Michigan State and Rutgers at 4. Northwestern and the Illini, Illinois at 4 p.m. Clemson in South Carolina. Night game, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. Texas A&M and LSU, Notre Dame, and Stanford out on the West Coast. Evening game, Washington State and Washington, a rivalry out in the Seattle area. And that is college ball. So on to the heart of the order here. Let's go to the Washington Post. And Doug Jones, basically the same story out of Alabama.com. We'll flip over there in a minute, that the followers of O.J. Simpson, African-American voters, must be energized here in the race there between Doug Jones and Judge Roy Moore. And that has not happened as of yet in that particular race out of Birmingham there. The Inslee Park Recreation Center was coming to life. The song Happy and other upbeat tunes. But Donald Williams was skeptical. He's a 75-year-old retired UPS worker. Came to cheer on Doug Jones. As of this day, I would say no, Williams said, who is an African-American, and this is Doug Jones' problem. He's got to get out and get voters energized. It has also generated energy in Alabama's African-American communities. There is a lot of talk, particularly about Judge Jones. With 2.5 weeks left on the election day, a once unfakeable victory in the heart of Deep Dixie is within Jones's reach, thanks largely to the scandal of Judge Moore. Moore's campaign believes he can win only if he pieces together an unusually delicate coalition. And we've talked about this before. Core Democrats, crossover votes from Republicans, discuss it with Moore. Will he have enough discuss with the Republicans? That's hard to say at this point in time. Right now, how many African Americans do not know there's an election, said State Senator Hank Sanders. No relation to Bernie Sanders. The challenge for Jones is clear, according to Democrats working on the race. Jones, who is a European and must secure more than 90% of the African-American vote while boosting African-American turnout from between 25 and 30% of the electorate. Similar levels that have turned out for Barack Obama in his race. Jones emphasizes his prosecution of KKK members that bombed the church in Birmingham and turned Birmingham into Birmingham into Birmingham. Let me get that right in a minute. He must far surpass the former president's tallies amongst Europeans. Exit poll shows that President Obama won 15% of the European vote in Alabama in 2012. According to Democratic strategists who worked on the race, he may have to win more than a third of European votes to beat Judge Moore. No doubt about that. Maximum African American turnout makes the rest of what he needs to be achieved. That's from Zach McCrary, a Democratic pollster. Jones is on pace to outspend Moore. Many people would have not felt that would be possible at $4.7 million compared with for early October to election, 636,000 for Moore and his allied groups. Well, the Republican senatorial campaign, others have pulled the plug on Moore. They're not putting any money into Moore. Jones is 63 years old. Is getting assistance on the campaign from electoral offices, etc. But will this be enough? That's very hard to say. Terry Swell, an African American and the only Democratic member of the state's congressional delegation, she's a Congress type, would be rooting for Doug Jones. Kyle Campbell, a 21-year-old University of Alabama law student who has been actively involved in Democratic politics in recent years, said in an interview that energy in his circle for the election is on par with a presidential campaign. They'll need to do this. If Roy Moore actually did win, I couldn't make any promises about it, but it would be very difficult for me to see a potential in Alabama. Well, this young man has grown up in Alabama, so I'm not much you could probably say about that. This is from Alabama.com, basically about the same thing. Oh, this is actually the Washington Post's article. We don't need to redo it. You see more and more newspapers now taking other newspapers' articles, and it was the same one that they published. Anyway, nonetheless, we move on to the Consumer Protection Bureau. Evidently, it has 2 acting directors now. The president appointed his budget director, Mickey Mulvaney, as the acting director of the Consumer Protection Bureau. Mulvaney once called it a joke and said he wished it didn't exist. Several defenders of the agency say they're worried about Mulvaney, and they should be very worried about Mulvaney. A series of events began on Friday when long-standing director, Quadre, announced that he would leave at the end of the day instead of the end of the month, and promoted his chief of staff, Lena English, to be the deputy director. Cadre has said in a letter, I thought he was supposed to leave at the end of the month also. And there's really no reason for him to leave. There's rumors that he wanted to run, the governor of Ohio. This is a problem. It would have been more important for him to have remained at the Consumer Protection Agency than moving out. I'm not certain if this is a case of personal ambition over the good, collective good of the people. Now, he's been a long-time director. The Consumer Protection Bureau was formed by no other than our own Elizabeth Warren. I have also come to recognize that by appointing the current chief of staff to the executive director position would minimize operational disruption and provide for a smooth transition. Trump immediately putting a Republican in charge of the agency without a Senate confirmation. Now, widely seen by analysts as an attempt to block Trump but a few hours later the White House announced Mulvaney as director of the office of the director would take over. The president looked forward to seeing Mulvaney, a right-wing former Congress type there. Dodd-Frank reform bill, now this is passed in 2010, states that the deputy director will serve as acting director in absence of the unavailability of the director. But legal experts say that would that the word unavailable could be open to various interpretations. For instance, the phrase could be interpreted to be about the director's health rather than a director's retirement. Courts will likely have to resolve the interpretation. That's Mike Calhoun, president of the Center for Responsible Lending. Others argue that the Federal Vacancy Reform Act gives the president wide latitude to appoint an acting director. Well, this is a bone of contention here. Is the only person allowed to name the new director of Consumer Protection Agency in the attempt to circumvent that authority by Cadre runs counter to fundamental principles of American governments. He's talking, this is Rick Manning, president of Americans for Limited Government, some right-wing operation. He's talking about the Administrative Act there, a Procedures Act. He doesn't really know what he's even talking about. Mulvaney has been one of the agency's toughest critics, And when he was a Republican congressman in 2005, he co-sponsored legislation to get rid of the agency. In a video interview with the Credit Union Times, Mulvaney complained it could be difficult even to have the Consumer Financial Protection Agency return a call. It's been truly an adversarial relationship so far. But what they have been able to do is wrestle with the various criminals out there. Has extracted billions of dollars in fines from the big banks, including $100 million from Wells Fargo. Abandoned operation last year for opening up millions of sham accounts that consumers did not ask for, customers. In the short years as the nation top consumer cop on the director cadre, the young bureau has returned $12 billion to over 29 million consumer victims of financial schemes by wrongdoing, ranging from Wall Street banks, mortgage companies, for-profit schools, to debt collectors, credit bureaus, payday lenders. That is Ed Mirowinsky, director of the consumer program at the U.S. Public Interest Research Group. So that is one of the agencies that we must keep going here, period. And there's an article also in the Post about the reshaping Department of Justice. I read over this. This is Beauregard Sessions. No doubt Beauregard Sessions is a racist. He's committed to do as much as humanly possible to dismantle civil rights, civil liberties of African Americans and other affected groups across the country, whether they be GLBC people, transgender people, etc. And he has been implementing this particular situation. Supporters and critics say the Attorney General has been among the most effective, no doubt about that, because he has more latitude to do things. On immigration, he has always talked about limiting immigration in the country to virtually none. There's a senator there, Susan Flores, Justice Department spokesman, said in a statement the Attorney General asked, well, forget about what he asked, to a country that traces his family's lineage, it would officially tell him a suspect was born and lives in you anyway. That's just in an interview that then spoke favorably of a 1924 law that exclude all immigrants from Asia, and strict caps on others. Well, no doubt about it. People from China and those places could not come here in 1924, but we're not going back to 1924. You can forget about it. Sessions said we then assimilated through 1965 and created a really solid middle class of Americans with assimilated immigrants, and that was good. When the numbers reached above this high in 24, the president and Congress changed the policy and slowed down immigration significantly. Well, the whole thing is, under the Trump administration, immigration will be slowed down. Jessica Vaughn, she's director of political studies for the Center for Immigration Studies, which advocates for moderating levels of immigration. She said it would give the Attorney General an E plus in his work, no doubt. And they always bring up this MS-13 gang out of Salvador as a red herring, so to speak. In January's confirmation hearing to become Attorney General turned bitter when, for the first time, Senator Booker testified against a colleague for a cabinet position because of his Civil Rights Act. The final vote was 52 to 47 votes there, so that would have him winning by 5 votes. Very few attorney generals imposed new changes in sentencing policies. He's brought up draconian sentencing policies, the Bureau of Prisons Project, because of increased enforcement and the prosecutorial efforts or maximum sentences here. Larry Thompson, who was a deputy, remember Larry Thompson, Attorney General on the G.W. Bush, is a friend of Sessions, and said that although he disagrees with the Attorney General changing policy, he believes Sessions was motivated by his belief that taking violent offenders off the streets is the right way to address public safety. Well, many of these people are not violent as he would claim they are. Kristen Clark, she's president and executive director of the National Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights on the Law, that was formed by John F. Kennedy, said that it stands in stark contrast to his overall efforts to roll back protection for transgender people. Get that right here. And let me finish this article up. The change of stance in the Texas case. Many of these things we have talked about before. We're seeing a federal government that is pulling back from protecting vulnerable communities in every aspect. That's Christian Clark speaking there. That it appears to be a pattern that we are seeing with this administration's unwillingness to use their enforcement powers. They are not interested in any kind of enforcement powers or whatsoever. Let's look at the polling here. The Gallup has DJ Trump at 28%. That was on Thursday. We don't need Friday polling here. The Rasmussen, it's been at 44 for a very long time. At Reuters, it's 36%. At YouGov, 40%. That's the YouGov Economist poll there. And what else do we have here? Generic ballot, basically, Democrats up by 9. That is both with the Reuters and it. And we go back to Tuesday. The last poll we had, this is from WBRC TV and Strategic Research here had Roy Moore up by 2. In other words, it's a dead heap there in Alabama. And we've looked at various polls back a little beyond the margin of error in Alabama. So that's where we are there. One other thing, on a Black Friday, we invite you to tune in to This Week in Economics on many of these same outlets. On the Numbers Man franchise, we talked about Black Friday, even though an estimated 115 million Americans rushed to malls, big box stores for Black Friday sales. Others were reporting that the annual spend-a-thon had lost its bang. And we were looking at the Dallas Morning News, basically the same thing there. Gone is the thrill of the stampede, the fist fights over big screen, and the to grab the anyway. Soggy Doggy, I'm not sure what this is. The Post, one Alabama veteran of long standing parking lot campouts, lamented that his Best Buy store had closed owing to America's changing spending habits. Well, you see a lot of big boxes going out here. It was seen by 5 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day. Online shopping. Shoppers had spent $1.52 billion via computers, tablets, smartphones, etc. Yeah, you see now that smartphones, a lot of this is from smartphones, and we were looking today, 70% of our listeners come to us via mobile phones. The number is expected to break a record 100 billion by the end of the holiday spree. So in other words, things have changed. Where does so-called the mall stores, etc.? Well, the trend is now there's going to be less and less of this. I was looking that one of the premier malls, the Mall of America, was closed on Thanksgiving Day, and fewer people are going to be venturing out. Now, some people, nostalgia, venturing out there, just the idea of looking at things, but also there is a situation where people are going to stores to actually see, feel, touch the product, particularly looking at TVs. We talked about this number of these lost leaders, as they used to be called, that are on special. You need to turn those TVs up and listen for the sound. That will tell you if there are capacitors and everything rattling around effectively in there, or of subquality, components. Because, say for instance, you'll have a certain model out from Samsung or out from various other makers there, Acer, who has made the TV set. But 10 different models are there, and the model would go something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, and so forth and so on. And different components are in those models, and all the TV sets would be at 63, whatever the situation is 70 inches, so forth and so on. So that is where you are, and various other components there. What is in there, you almost have to take a schematic with you, period. The frantic immersion in material gratification symbolized by Black Friday is the precise opposite of a spiritual connection of interpersonal engagement. The person fighting a neighbor for a laptop. You don't hear as much as they'll probably be fighting somebody for a mobile phone, but you get the mobile phone now that is unlocked. You can find that online. So that is basically what is happening. One example of National Main Street Center, which began in 1980, is a nonprofit of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Has worked with 2,200 communities to rehabilitate closed and 246,000 buildings, created more than a half million jobs, and reinvested $56.5 billion. This is not quite a Black Friday shopping day, but there is some hope. Well, maybe so. But all of these changes that are out there are indeed changes during the same time. However, 100,000 farmers age of 45 to 54 abandoned the plow. Now, this is interesting here. We're going to do a special on farms. Hopefully that'll come up on Sunday, but it will come soon. With Willie Nelson's Farm Aid. Family farms operated young college-educated families. Trade concrete for soil between 2007 2012. Department of Agriculture reported 2,384 new farmers between 25 and 34 during the same time. Of course, 100,000 had abandoned the farm, but the new farms are different kinds of farms. A lot of them are organic farms, specialized farms, and in California they're growing cannabis. That's the same thing in Washington State, etc. So we are seeing things progress. From the Dallas Morning News, as we finish up here, Uncle Carl was off. This is a holiday weekend, so a little different kinds of situations going on. This is here's where you can get download the JFK files. This was in the Dallas Morning News. It was updated on the 27th of October. We'll put this out here on the JFK Assassinations Records Collection Act there. So you log into the National Archives Records page, and you can do it from here. Go to 2017 release page. Use the spreadsheet to choose a document you want to view, and good luck researching it. So we'll put a link to this one up there, and you can go at it. This will do it for the week that was. We'll see you again on the Monday Morning Quarterback on Monday morning. We'll have some of the games over the weekend. The boycott against the NFL is still being maintained there. Excuse me. Colin Kaepernick has branched out, and he is more into community activities now. We have a little bit of theory there that the taking the knee protests of the owners, back up a second here, have been talking about now just keeping the players in the locker room until after the national anthem is played. But this is more than just a national anthem. This is an organizing tool out there with the NFL Players Union and the community. So this is moving just beyond taking a knee, and Colin Kopanek is talking about this, to organizing within the community for social change. And you'll see more and more of this. Is what happened with the Women's March. We have Madonna on our Friday Jobber as part of our introduction there, and she asked a question. Actually, the question is rhetorical in the sense that opponents of the Women's March said, well, it never will amount to anything. That is absolutely absurd. If you look into Virginia and Jerry Pippin's former very red state of Oklahoma, where these women were being elected right and left, transgender, gay women, etc., and coming out and more women running than ever. We had a situation on judges in Virginia. The number of judges being elected there in Virginia, as Paula commented, the retired federal judge, that some people are on the run. There's no doubt about that. Things are changing, and this is because of the Women's March. Similarly, we'll see changes because of this neo-protest with the NFL, because again, the NFL is in every major city. Millions of people tune into it, the games, and millions more buy paraphernalia, t-shirts, hats, and you'll see those in African American communities. In our opinion, too many, but nonetheless they are there. And those are some of the side benefits. We notice also that the Super Bowl will not only be played, they'll have effectively 2 weeks of activities out in the Midwest, and at the same time there's a week of protest before the feds close down the Super Bowl area. But we throw that in very quickly here. Nonetheless, have a good weekend. Hopefully you had a good holiday. We did, incidentally, a special Thanksgiving show there. Not around Thanksgiving in an individualistic standpoint, but around collective action, around family get-togethers, that sort of thing. For that day is a family day. That's the reason some of these mega malls are not being open, and some of the brick and mortar stores that know what's good for them are not open also, because people can go online and they before the dinner or whatever they are having, meetings, etc. Good day. And remembering Jerry Pippin on his 77th birthday, which he was born on this day 77 years ago, November the 25th, 2017.